Hi, I'm Steve Scott, and welcome to this webinar. I'm excited that you're joining us. And if you're like me, you may have enjoyed a little bit of success, or you may have enjoyed no real success in your life. I was kind of like that one. Back in 1976, I had flunked out of 9 jobs in my first 6 years after college. I graduated with a business degree from Arizona State University with a specialization in marketing. I thought I was going to burn up the turf. I was going to go to work for an ad agency and really make a name for myself. Well, I couldn't even get an ad agency to hire me. Nobody wants to hire somebody without experience, and I had no experience. I ended up selling life insurance on my first job, and I was so miserable at that in the 6 months I worked there, I only sold 2 policies, one to myself and one to my best friend. That was pretty much the end of job number 1. Then job number 2 came. Not a lot of success there. Job number 3 was really my first marketing job, and I thought, aha, this is where I settle in. Now I'm going to be successful. And when I was hired on probation. It seemed they didn't want to make a full commitment to a guy that had already lost 2 jobs in his first 8 or 9 months after school. And so they hired me on probation, and they said, we're going to watch you for 9 months, and if you do well, we'll give you a raise. We'll raise you up to a normal human wage. And if you don't do well, maybe you'll find success on your next job. So I really worked my rear end off. In fact, there were 3,500 employees in that company, and other than security, I was first in and last out every single day. I worked in the marketing department. I knew what I was doing, I thought. And yet, 9 months into the job, my boss called me in. He was the vice president of marketing for this company, and he was somewhat of a marketing guru, a Philadelphia phenom. And he calls me in and he said, Steve, have a seat. Nicest thing he said that day. And he said, Steve, you are the single greatest disappointment in my entire career. You will never succeed in marketing, my chosen field. And then he said, you have 20 minutes to clean out your desk. And that really wiped me out because I just had 9 months earlier my first child. And I thought this was it. I'm going to make a career. I'm going to be successful. And boom, I get that 9 months into it. Started my job number 10 a few days later, another insurance company. Not selling, but working as a marketing specialist. That job lasted a few months, and I kept going like that. No matter what I did, I just couldn't succeed. And one day, a dear friend of mine was visiting me in Phoenix. He was from Chicago, and this man was the wisest man I had ever met. This man had wisdom just oozing out of his brain, out of his eyes, out of his mouth. He was just a wise man, very successful. And I said, Gary, I don't understand it. No matter what I do, I just can't succeed. I know I'm not stupid. I have a good IQ. I understand my craft, which is marketing and human behavior, human psychology. I understand all that. And I'm not lazy. I'm first in, last out at every job I go to. And yet I just can't keep a job for more than 6 or 7 months. And I don't know what to do. And Gary said something really neat. He said, let me pray about it. Not a usual response when you ask a question, but it was a good one. And the next morning he comes to breakfast and he said, Steve, I found the answer. How would you like to be wiser than all of your bosses ever? I said, yeah, right. I was 26 years old. He said, no, there's something you can do. If you do it for 2 years, in 2 years you'll be wiser than all your bosses. And in 5 years, you'll probably be a millionaire. And that really made me laugh because I was so broke that I barely had grocery money from week to week. And yet now he says I can do something for 2 years. And if I do it, I'll probably be a millionaire in 5. Would you believe that at the age of 26? If you're like me, you'd probably say no. It's preposterous, right? By that time, I had lost 6 jobs. But I said, Gary, what do I do? What's your solution? And he said, there's 31 chapters in the Book of Proverbs. There's 31 days in the month. Every day, read the chapter of the day. And with pencil and paper in hand and write down the wisdom and insights that you gain, and then begin to apply those to your work. He said, do that for 2 years. It'll take you through the Book of Proverbs 24 times. And I promise you, it will change everything. Well, I had nothing to lose. When you're broke, you have nothing to lose. You're not going to lose your money because you don't have any money, right? You might lose your little house, but who cares, because it's a little house. And hey, if you lose it, you lose it. But I decided to go ahead and give it a try. And in the next 18 months, I went through Proverbs about 18 times. And I went through job number 6, 7, 8. And then started job number 9 in January of 1976. But by this time, having gone through Proverbs 18 times, I had a group of strategies that were mind-boggling. And even though I was kind of hired as a peon for this catalog company, I was an assistant product manager in the marketing department of a catalog company. Oddly enough, that was the same position I'd held a couple years earlier when I got fired from job number 3. So I hadn't made a lot of progress, but I had strategies that I had never had before. What is a strategy? A strategy is something that you do. It's an approach. My son was a national champion high jumper. And if ever you've watched the high jump, you watch the high jumper make his approach, right? He runs anywhere from 7 to 9 to 11 steps, makes a hard turn, high torque turn, and then he leaps backward over a bar. And that approach only takes about 6 seconds. And yet, if you have a good approach, you clear a lot of height. If you have a bad approach, doesn't matter what else you do right, it's going to be a bust. And that's what a strategy is. A strategy is simply how do you approach a problem, an opportunity, a crisis, a circumstance, a situation. A strategy is just how you approach it, like that high jump. Well, my son developed a very good approach and won the national championship in high jump in high school when he was 16 years old, and ended up with a track scholarship. He had a coach that showed him that his approach that he used to have was all wrong. He had to learn a brand new approach. He had to learn brand new techniques and skill sets to maximize every phase of that approach, right up to the leap over the bar. But when he did it, he put together a jump that was high enough to win the national championship. Well, we're going to do the same thing. In Proverbs, we see all these incredible approaches. And so I went ahead and I applied these approaches to job number 9. And lo and behold, even as a peon, the lowest level person in the marketing department, I came up with a project that doubled the company's sales from $30 million a year to $60 million a year. And I did it in 3 months. So all of a sudden, I went from a chronic failure to someone who was the home run king at that company. And with that, another man who I dearly loved that I had worked for years earlier, he lived in Philadelphia. He came to me and said, Steve, if you could find a product that you and I could sell on TV, you could do for us what you just did for Ambassador. You can quit your job at Ambassador, come to work with me. We'll start our own little marketing company, and it could be amazing. Well, I started looking for a product, and fortunately, I found one. I quit my job at Ambassador. They offered to double my salary if I'd stay, offered to make me vice president of marketing at the age of 27 if I'd stay. When I said, no, I'm going to go do this, the CEO of the company said, can you give me 10 hours a week? That's all I'm asking for, just 10 hours a week that you can manage the TV campaign you just created. Can you do that for 1 year? If you will, I'll keep you on full salary for a year. So I moved back to Philadelphia from Phoenix, and on May 10th, 1976, my partner and I started a new little company with his $5,000 and my ideas and my strategies, and the strategies were from Proverbs. And we started this little company, and on that $5,000, we shot a commercial on a new product the world had never heard of. put it on TV, and lo and behold, within a few months, our sales were $1 million a week. Did you hear me? $1 million a week. And we had started with that $5,000. Well, Gary Smalley was wrong. It didn't take 5 years to become a millionaire. I was a millionaire within 2.5 years of the time I started studying and looking for strategies in the Book of Proverbs. And so we never looked back. In fact, that company to date has done about $4 billion in sales. We've launched lots of national brands. If you've ever seen Chuck Norris and Christy Brinkley on the Total Gym, that's a piece of fitness equipment that slides up and down. That particular one's been on the air ever since we launched it in 1996. We're in our 23rd year. Can you believe that? 23 years. Longest running infomercial in television history, and yet that was just one. We did insurance companies. We had a cosmetic company. We had a skincare company. We had a hair care company. We had a fitness company, always with celebrities, always on television. All in all, I generated 40 million phone calls with the commercials and infomercials I wrote and produced. And our company made, like I said, grossed billions of dollars. Total Gym alone has passed the $3 billion mark. And so life became pretty nice that way. We had all the success we could imagine. But all of it goes back to these strategies. Who would think? Here we think education changes everything. Yeah, it changes a lot of things for some people. Bill Gates didn't complete college. Stephen Jobs didn't complete college. Thomas Edison didn't complete first grade. He only made it 3 or 4 months into first grade when he got kicked out of school. So education isn't necessarily the answer. Then we think, well, it's my background. It's where I came from, right? If I come from good, solid roots, well, my parents had never enjoyed extraordinary success. My partner's parents never enjoyed extraordinary success. In fact, our partnership, I was the only college graduate in the whole group. And that didn't really work for me. One guy had been an oil field worker. Another guy had been a convenience store clerk. Another guy had been a printing estimator. And so, and yet, we all made millions and millions and millions of dollars personally. That's the power of these strategies. See, it's not your education. It's not your background. All those things might be important. It's not even how much money you had in the bank. We did this with $5,000. That's not a lot of money. Even in 76, that wasn't a lot of money. You couldn't buy half of a car with $5,000 back then. And yet we launched a business that became a multi-billion-dollar business. And so what happened is I decided to make these strategies public. I wrote a book that talked on some of them. It was my first book. It was called A Millionaire's Notebook. And Donald Trump endorsed that book back when obviously he wasn't in politics in 1996. It was the first book he had ever endorsed that he didn't write. And he said, Steve Scott's uncanny insights and strategies are so simple and easily applied. I believe they can empower any reader, from a college student to a small business owner to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, to achieve levels of success they haven't yet dreamed of. You see, when you use these strategies, it takes you out of the arena you're in and puts you in a whole new arena. It removes the ceiling on your potential, completely removes it. And so he was right. Donald was right about this when he said, you'll achieve levels of success you haven't even dreamed of. Just think of the times when you thought, oh, if only I could do this, or if I could do that. Well, those are the ones you've dreamed of. How about going beyond that to a level of success you haven't yet dreamed of? That's what Trump said these strategies could do. And I believe they can do it for anybody. It's not what you have right now. It's the strategies you use. Now, to use a strategy, you have to have skill sets. For example, one of the strategies out of Proverbs, Proverbs writes a lot on communication. Now, communication is this number one problem in business. It's the number one problem in marriage. It's the number one problem in parenting. Communication is everything. Most people, though they can speak and write and read, are horrible communicators. And you say, well, you know, I know grammar. I'm not that bad of a communicator. No, that's not communicating. That's grammar. Communicating, effective communication, is enabling the other person to clearly understand what you're saying, and here's where it breaks down, and actually feel what you're feeling. Well, to do that, you have to do a whole bunch of things. There's about 9 different things you need to do. For example, one of those 9 things is gaining an understanding of the perspective or the frame of reference of the person you're communicating to. Everybody has a different frame of reference. A child thinks of an adult as being somebody that's like a giant, right? A little child. At the same time, an adult has the frame of reference that that little child down there, no matter what he does, really can't hurt me. And they're 2 completely different frames of reference. The difference frame of reference for a male versus female, the gender differences, they're real. Psychologically, emotionally, physically, they're all real. Everybody has a different frame of reference. What kind of family you come from? You come from a family where everybody yelled at each other, that's one frame of reference. You come from a family where nobody yelled, that's another frame of reference. And so understanding the other person's frame of reference is critical to effective communication. But that's just one of the 9 things. But here's where it gets really cool. Did you know there are 4 skill sets, not 14, not 400, just 4 skill sets that can take somebody that's a poor and ineffective communicator and turn them into an incredibly effective and persuasive communicator. And it was these 4 skill sets that allowed me to generate, with my commercials that I wrote, over 40 million phone calls. On that first job, if you'll remember, I couldn't even sell 3 life insurance policies. In 6 months, I sold 2, one to me and one to my best friend. When I learned these 4 skill sets and applied them to selling insurance on TV, I sold over 2 million life and health insurance policies. So these strategies that we're talking about, the skill sets that go with them, they're all learnable. That's one thing that's really neat, is none of them take a PhD or a master's degree or even a high school education to learn. Anybody can learn these. In fact, Edison actually had some of these when he was a child. He was amazing that way. And so in the seminar, in fact, what happened was I wrote a book and it became a bestseller, and then I wrote another book and that was a bestseller, and then I wrote another book and that was a bestseller. So after 3 bestsellers, my publisher, Random House, said, hey, we will publish anything you want to write about. And what I wanted to write about were these strategies. And so I went ahead and wrote a book about that. And it was a worldwide bestseller. It went into like 30 different languages. And my partners at American Telecast said, gee, Steve, why don't we turn this into a video seminar where you teach these strategies and skill sets, and we can take as much time as you want. And I said, wow, that really does sound good. Because you can go so much further with multimedia than you can with just a book. People get easily distracted, and learning concepts from books, most people don't. Honestly, most people never read past the 3rd chapter of any book. And so that's a little bit harder. So I went ahead and we put over $1 million into developing this series called The Master Strategies of Superachievers. And we did that. And we sold millions of dollars worth of them on television. And they sold for $600 a set. Well, one day my son came to me and he said, Dad, now that we're in the days of the internet, you don't need DVDs, you don't need CDs, you don't need big printed manuals. You can do everything online. And you can do it inexpensively, which means you can sell your product for a lot less. And he said, how would you feel, Dad, if we did a seminar like you did on Master Strategies, and we did it on the Book of Proverbs, where you teach the strategies and the skill sets to apply those strategies so you can do for other people what your best friend Gary Smalley did for you. And I said, Ryan, that's brilliant. So we went ahead and did a series called Proverbs Power. And in this series, I go right through. I show you, for example, how you can read Proverbs completely differently than you've ever read it. And you wait a minute. Reading a book is reading a book is reading a book, right? Wrong. Okay? You can read a book and get one thing out of it. Stephen Jobs reading the same book will see a whole different set of applications. Same book. And you may apply it to your marriage. Jobs applies it to his very next thing he's bringing out from Apple when he was alive. And it's that varied. Well, how you study Proverbs, for example, that's one of the first things we show you. How you can really, Proverbs is filled with hidden treasures. And so we show you how to dig a little bit deeper than normal and find these treasures. And when these treasures are applied, they bring change, extraordinary change, always change for the better. You can apply them to your parenting. You can apply them to your relationships. You can apply them to your marriage. You can apply them to your work. If you work a 9-to-5 job, you can become the most valued employee in your company. I was getting on a plane, and as I was walking down the jetway, a man stopped me and he said, "Are you Steve Scott?" And I said, "Yeah." "Do I know you from somewhere?" He says, "No, but you're my mentor." I said, "Your mentor?" He said, yeah, I bought your Master Strategies program. And I started watching it with a mastermind group that I'm a part of. And it was so life-changing that we then watched it a second time and brought our wives into it. And it's been amazing what's happened. I said, "Well, tell me what happened." And we ended up sitting next to each other on the plane. And it turned out that in 18 months, they had all doubled, tripled, or quadrupled their income. Their marriages had gotten better. They had become better parents. Some of them, this guy had gone through some real adversity, including the death of a child, which is nothing's worse than that. That's the worst. And yet these had changed his life. And they were all the strategies from Proverbs. And what we have discovered is wherever these strategies are applied, they bring about, like I said, extraordinary change, just like Donald Trump said they would. And whether you're political or not, and whether Trump bothers you or not, that's not the issue. The issue is, he started with $1 million and built it into billions of dollars. So you got to give a little credit for that. But he does know a good strategy when he sees one. And he's not the only one that endorsed these strategies. A lot of very well-known people have, because as they looked at those strategies, they realized it was the principles in those strategies that had changed their lives. And so anyway, my son went ahead and put together this program called Proverbs Power, where I go ahead and I teach strategy by strategy by strategy, and then the specific skill sets to apply those strategies to wherever you want to improve, wherever you want to go in a whole new way. And so wherever they're applied, they will work. I know people that have never written a book, applied it to their desire to write books, and now they're best-selling authors, believe it or not. I mean, that's one guy that got my stuff, and he became a best-selling author. I used these strategies with another friend. His wife started a little business, and by the time they sold their last business, they put over $1.6 billion into their pockets or bank accounts. So the strategies work. Thanks for joining us on this little webinar. I hope you will avail yourself to Proverbs Power. I hope that you can see that what it did for me and what it's done for so many other people, it can do for you. Just click on the link below. I know that it's $99 for lifetime access. There's many, many hours of material. There's electronic workbooks, everything you need to discover these strategies and begin to apply them to the most important areas of your life, whether it's your relationships, your friendships, your work, your current job, a project, a new business that you want to start. It doesn't matter what you apply it to. Once you begin to learn and apply these strategies and these skill sets, they can change anything and everything, and they have for me. I've had living proof. They took a chronic failure that failed in 9 jobs in 6 years and turned me into a chronic success to where I've now created businesses that have done billions of dollars in sales. Each one a startup. Every business I start is a startup. I'm starting a new one now. And we're already excited over what that one's doing. So I just hope you'll give it a shot. Okay, you have nothing to lose and a whole new life to gain.